Janet Wortham Morgan started breeding in the 1980s. Was out for a few years and then came back into it. And when I came back into it, we had serious problems with familial Shar Pei fever in the breed. 2011, they came out with a study that showed it was linked to the trait with the heavy wrinkles. And I loved the heavy wrinkles, but I had to adjust what I loved because it's better than trying to adjust to a client calling because their dog's in kidney failure from this. So my priorities and my taste shifted to go with the health. It's familial Shar Pei fever, or what they call Shar Pei autoinflammatory disease, is when the body is overproducing a certain biochemical component called hyaluronan. So this is what causes the wrinkles. Producing too much of that causes inflammation in the body, which can ultimately lead to organ failure and death in some cases, a lot of cases. I run a dog group that's over 10,000 members, and we see tons and tons of dogs that are coming up with this and dogs that are dying of renal failure or liver failure or both. So there's a mess out there, but the science now, since the studies and the tests became available to test for the risk factor, this is something that we could mitigate the damage if we all focused on it. So far, there's only a few breeders that are even trying to develop a gene pool that is lower risk in the United States, and that comes from the traditional lines. The traditional is what we had when we originally imported the dogs here. Most of them were traditional, but we bred away from that towards the heavier wrinkled because we liked it and because the public did, but we didn't know that it was going to cause all these health issues back then. But now we know. So we need to do better.
Right. And so really the wrinkles were aesthetic, not really a genetic purpose, correct?
Yeah, there's no genetic purpose for them. They were to make the dogs look more fierce, and because basically the westernized Shar Pei were, non-traditionals, was because the market wanted the cute little wrinkly dogs, and they still do, because the buyers aren't educated to realize that in most cases, the ones that are the very heavy wrinkled dogs are at high risk. Not in every case. There's a few lower risk dogs that have some wrinkle, but not like the westernized Shar Pei does. Not the extent and not the risk factor.
And was there crossing of other breeds to create more wrinkles?
No, I wouldn't say there was that. I think there was crossing of other breeds in the time when the Chinese were using them as fighting dogs. And that was a very short time in history. And that was because they thought it would make them less vulnerable to attacks on major organs or blood vessels, etc. But it turned out they really weren't good for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of fell away. And then when we started importing them here to the U.S. in the 1970s, we did import some dogs that had the meat mouth, which was higher risk, and we also imported traditionals, which had the lower risk. But we didn't know back then what it meant.
Right.
Now we know. Mm-hmm. We have the science. Mm-hmm. And we have the tests that can show what risk factor the dogs are. Mm. The genetics on Shar Pei autoinflammatory disease risk there are three categories, so to speak, of genetic test markers that can indicate higher or low risk. They're separated by what they call a copy number variant. So it's a CNV 2, 6, or 10, with 2 being lowest risk, 6 being moderate risk, and 10 being high risk. And the genetic test that's out now can pinpoint those markers. But not everybody's getting tested, and not everybody's heeding the advice that the test offers. Mm-hmm. But there are a few other breeders that are doing that. Diane Gray's doing that, Cindy Canaro Cable, and of course Michaela Pinkett, who's a good friend of mine, is also working on the traditional lines. But right now, that's all we have in the U.S. is we have 4 dogs in the U.S. that are lowest risk. We're the starting generation of those that are going to try to make a difference in building a gene pool, but we need more people to focus in that direction, which we're hoping for because we won't be able to do it all. Not so much in Canada. All the breeders that I mentioned, the other 3 breeders are here in the continental United States. There are some other breeders in Europe, the UK, Norway, and some, Austria, Germany that are also working on this with some of the original traditional lines. In fact, some of them are importing directly from China, which is very expensive, which is another reason why it's limited. I'd like to see breeders go into a cooperative where they can both pay for a, or get into a group and import some good breeding stock and then split the difference and share the stud services. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, the dog world is pretty divided.
Pretty clicky. And as one client recently told me, they talked to a breeder about why they don't breed the lower risk dogs, and the breeder said, well, they're just ugly. And, you can adjust your tastes to something that's healthier. But I'd rather have a dog that's not as heavily wrinkled where I'm not going to get a phone call that they're dying of kidney failure down the road. I've had that happen, and it's heartbreaking. And it's one of the motivations for me moving towards the traditionals.